喂
喂，你好，
喂，
哎，你好，你是医生吗？这个移植手术啊，
可以做的，
那要等多久啊？
你放1个礼拜左右就可以做了。
还有没有这种列举的反这种提供的就说是很好，
这个我们都是这种。
On today's Edge of Wonder, we'll peer into the darkness that is China's organ harvesting trade. How does our current relationship with China affect this evil industry? What about ties between the CCP and the Clinton Foundation? And we'll talk about China and the deep state. Ever heard of the false fire incident back in 2001? What about the harvesting of organs from living donors? And we'll follow the money into the legal areas of China's organ transplant industry. Here we go. Part 2. Organ harvesting collusion. Only on the Edge of Wonder.
Welcome to Edge of Wonder for our part 2 of exposing China's organ harvesting.
In our first episode, we set the stage for you all by explaining exactly what happened during the Tiananmen Square massacre in China. We also explained how Jiang Zemin rose to power to become the most ruthless leader after Mao by carrying out Deng Xiaoping's order to send in the military and tanks to wipe out the protesters.
We also covered the spiritual practice of Falun Dafa or Falun Gong, how the Chinese Communist Party initially promoted it, and how over 100 million people picked up the spiritual practice inside China by 1999.
Swept with jealousy over Falun Gong's rapidly growing popularity, Jiang launched the most hateful persecution to date on July 20th, 1999, affecting over 100 million Chinese people, not even including family members.
Now, underground Christians, minority, and ethnic groups are also being persecuted. So if you haven't seen our part 1 of organ harvesting, we would highly recommend you do that before going on to this one. Because like we said, this sets the stage.
So we last left off at the start of the persecution and how the Chinese Communist Party jailed Falun Gong practitioners, tortured them, forced employers to fire them, and stole their bank accounts. The Chinese police arrested anyone who practiced, no matter their age.
Before we start talking directly about why and how China became the country facilitating the most organ transplants, let's talk about the deal that gave them control over the global economy. Bill Clinton's approval for China to enter the World Trade Organization.
On the surface, it seemed noble. Allow China to trade with the West and hopefully assimilate to the Western society, becoming more democratic and free.
Yeah, it sounds nice. President Clinton at the time even talked about how it would bring in more jobs to the American people. But we all know that for sure did not happen. And instead, China took over the global markets and the Chinese government's control over its people's speech and knowledge grew as they put more internet censorship in place.
China lowered their costs so much that companies decided to completely move their businesses to China, closing down their factories in the US.
As companies moved east, this led to a huge job loss in the US. China also bribed other countries to ensure that only their imports would come from China. Soon, no country could compete with them. Bill Clinton even said in his speech,
to crack down on people for their religious views or their political expression or because they want to be in an association like the Falun Gong. I don't think that's right. The leaders of China are not foolish people, they're intelligent people. They know if they open these markets, they know if you go in there and everybody gets connected to the internet, that change is coming more rapidly in ways that you cannot control, and people will be able to define their future independent of the government's ability to control it more than ever before. And we cannot let our disagreements with government policy get in the way of our interest in a long-term partnership with the most populous country on earth.
Clinton goes on to say that having the Chinese connect with the free world will bring new changes for China that will better China, and even says, quote, and people will be able to define their future independent of the government's ability to control it more than ever before.
Now, this all sounds good on the surface, right? But it doesn't stop here. According to an official report from the US National Security in 1999, China stole design information on the US's most advanced thermonuclear weapons while Clinton was still in office.
But if you look at this a little bit more closely, Did they steal it, or was it given to them? According to the Washington Examiner, in order to please a Democratic donor who was the CEO of Laurel and Hughes Electronics, Clinton looked the other way while it sold a satellite to China.
But this company, which was eventually sold to Lockheed Martin, went to advise China without telling our government first.
I mean, isn't this treason?
And according to the reports, also helped China improve their long-range rockets. He also gave them a lot more critical technical knowledge. Now, this intel should have never been shared with China.
Also, author Matthew Vadum of capitalresearch.org writes, quote, "The Clinton administration accepted millions of dollars from the military and intelligence services of at least one hostile foreign power. All of this was done in exchange for illegal campaign contributions from a massive totalitarian country determined to eclipse the US as a world superpower."
Of course, this foreign power was China. And who was leading China? None other than Jiang Zemin.
There he is.
Whether knowingly or unknowingly, Clinton was doing business with someone who we literally call Satan in like a human form, although most of these deep state people may not be far from that either.
Author David Horowitz writes in his book, The Black Book of the American Left, Volume 7, one of the key technological breaks China received without having to spy to get it was the deliverance of supercomputers once banned from export for security reasons.
So along with military weapons, China was receiving many supercomputers, which at this time was being used solely for the military. So why was Clinton allowing China to get this tech? What did he think they were using it for? Curing cancer?
According to the Washington Examiner, this was an elaborate money-making scheme that went to the highest levels of the US government, coming back to communist China.
China funded billions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation through a few different Chinese businessmen. However, when the trial started, most of the individuals involved refused questioning, pleaded the fifth, or fled the country. And I'm sure there was a few suicides as well, but...
Well, during this time, while Bill Clinton was still president, he was never officially charged with this crime. However, now it makes more sense why the Republicans went after him during the Monica Lewinsky trial. But we'll come back to the Clintons and show how deep their connections go soon.
So what happened to China as it entered the global market? Well, instead of the Chinese gaining more freedom, they lost more freedom. Companies like Cisco, Yahoo, Microsoft, and Google cooperated with China to build Golden Shield, which everyone else in the world calls the Great Firewall. The Great Firewall is an elaborate censorship system that blocks anyone from getting outside information within China.
Wired covered a leaked internal Cisco document which states that one of the Golden Shield's goals was to, quote, combat Falun Gong, evil religion, and other hostiles. A statement that was attributed to Runsin Li, the Chinese government information technology chief in charge of developing the project.
What? It can't be more explicit than that. There was a conscious effort from the CCP to hide their tracks and the evil acts they enacted on Falun Gong practitioners.
On a larger scale, this seems to have been a deep state plot all along. First, subvert America by weakening their economy. Second, create political and technological systems that benefited the corrupt leaders of China and the global elites. Third, use that advanced censorship technology to control the narrative, spreading false propaganda and hiding the truth from the general populace.
And it did destroy our economy in the US. The US lost so many jobs. Products became cheaply made. China had so much money coming in that they then started to buy out all the American companies, including AMC theaters.
In fact, China started to invest heavily in colleges, foundations, government organizations, and especially Hollywood. This was all for propaganda and control. For example, with something like organ harvesting, if someone from one of these institutes started calling China out, they would threaten to pull out all of their funding. See how it all works?
China produced so many products due to their slave labor prison camp system. They oversaw thousands upon thousands of prisoners, making exported products that cost nothing to the Chinese businessmen affiliated with the CCP and the military.
If someone overseas would have a change of heart, they would either be bought out, bribed, or blackmailed. Chinese companies stole patents, sensitive info, blueprints, and even brand names, and this is all backed up. This is not just us saying this.
There's even a company that makes leather products in China called iPhone, which was sued by Apple But since all this happened in China, Apple actually lost the lawsuit.
This happens to almost every company in China. The CCP will also steal sensitive information with cyber attacks, whether a company is inside of China or outside of China. Hardly anyone says anything out of fear of facing criticism or scared for retribution from the rest of the world.
To combat all of this censorship, the Chinese people outside of China created a software called FreeGate. This way, people inside China can download and use it to circumvent the firewall and censored content such as the Tiananmen Square massacre and Falun Gong.
So instead of Bill Clinton's future of China, where the Chinese become more free, where jobs increase in the US, and China becomes great pals with the US, the exact opposite happened.
This actually gave Jiang more freedom to carry out his persecutions, since the US was giving in to China's demands and was basically bowing to China at every turn.
Knowing that he had more freedom now that the US was off his back, he pressed even harder for the persecution of Falun Gong. But because his plan to completely destroy it in 3 months failed miserably, he had to think of another way to vilify Falun Gong and its practitioners.
On January 23, 2001, the Chinese government orchestrated a stunt where 5 people set themselves on fire in Tiananmen Square in Beijing. They were claiming to be Falun Gong practitioners. It is known as the Self-Immolation Hoax. Even if you just look at the footage once, you'll notice so many inconsistencies and contradictions that just don't add up.
Yeah, I mean, before it even began, cameras were already set up from multiple angles, fire trucks were on standby, and media personnel who just happened to be in the area, and there was also a massive state-controlled blitz afterwards. Yeah, when watching the footage, you can see a woman trying to help the so-called practitioners get hit on the head with a police baton.
The people who did set themselves on fire seemed to be wearing protective gear, didn't know the proper movements to the Falun Gong practice, and a slew of other things. Also, many Western media, such as the Washington Post, analyzed the video and agreed it was staged. Soon, Jiang realized that he had all of these healthy people inside all of these prison sites who were being tortured to death or used for forced labor. But how could the Chinese Communist Party further profit from these people?
Knowing China never had an organ donation system in their country, he realized by doing organ transplants, the CCP and the military could save so much money coming in that they could almost control every aspect of the world markets.
Just like the Soviet Union's gulags and Hitler's Gestapo, Jiang and his gang created the 610 office, specifically to control, monitor, and handle the Falun Gong persecution. It was created on June 10th, hence the name 610.
He moved his most trusted officials to the highest ranks and placed them in charge of the 610 office. With over 1 billion people in China alone, Jiang knew that organ transplantation is a huge money-making opportunity.
But organs can't be held in storage and used when needed. They have to be fresh. Soon, instead of beating and torturing people, they began leaving them alone but drawing their blood. This was actually to get what blood type they were.
These people were living lab rats for the Chinese regime. When someone needed an organ, they would grab the person, take them to either a secret area of the hospital or an underground base. Doctors would then cut their organs out of them while they were alive.
This way, the organs are fresh and they can carry them over to the rooms where the patients are. They would never say who the donor was, or if they did, they would just say it was a prisoner who was executed.
Now, some of you might be thinking, this is too much. How can a regime be evil enough to do this, and how are they getting away with this? Aren't the recipients of these organs supposed to know who they're getting the organs from?
It all comes down to money and control. Since the CCP and the military are the ones doing this, they don't need to answer to anyone. They just tell people that these were executed prisoners, and since it's the military, they keep no records. If the body is returned to the family, it was labeled as a suicide.
Not to mention, if a person is in dire straits and really needs an organ to survive, they're gonna gloss over where that organ is coming from. I mean, it doesn't really take that much to put this together, how something like this could happen, right?
Yeah, or they may just not want to know.
Exactly. Now, there are many stories of doctors now coming out giving their testimonials of how they were forced to murder other Chinese people, mostly Falun Gong and Christians. The movie Human Harvest has many of these stories along with facts and evidence. Here's a part of the trailer with a doctor talking about his experience.
先摘的是心脏，然后再摘的是肾。当心脏的血管剪到一下，它就进行一阵抽搐，然后那个非常可怕的
When they cut through, blood still come out. That is to say, blood still running. That means this person's still alive.
So the question becomes, how has China become the #2 transplant country in the world?
The place where every other country in the world gets its organs, not available to them. Where are these organs coming from?
也被逼知道自杀了。
It's a new form of evil, it's a new form of abuse, it's something that nobody's ever done before.
This is a crime against humanity.
我想，如果我要找一些劝说我的家人，找一些让他们站出来，也许会很多人存活在这个世界上。
The government in China is doing a terrible thing, which is comparable to what the Nazis did.
I actually got a death threat at one event. You're putting your own life at risk. Are you not afraid?
According to a detailed investigation from the Epoch Times, the CCP built hospitals, but these were not to cure the sick, but to facilitate mass murder run by the Chinese military. These hospitals existed for the sole purpose of performing organ transplants.
According to the report, tens of thousands were killed just in the Tianjin First Central Hospital alone. So if you do the math, in this hospital that has 500 beds was built in 2006, and let's say that the average stay is 1 month, this comes out to over 70,000. And that's just for one hospital out of hundreds.
But it doesn't stop just here. Many times an organ would fail or wouldn't work properly after the transplant. So for sure, up to more than one person would be killed just to find a compatible organ for one patient. So the number just from a single hospital alone could be well over hundreds of thousands.
So it's possible that over 1 million Chinese people a year are being killed for their organs. Now granted, some are actual donors from family members, but please, I mean, this would be an extremely low number since China doesn't have an organ donation system. I mean, we have to understand that.
Right, and the total number of transplants in the entire US for 2015 was about 23,000, with a waiting list that could be for years. So how long does one need to wait for a heart in China?
2 weeks.
Yep, just 2 weeks.
So how do we know it was 2 weeks? Because of investigations being performed by many researchers. A Daily Mail article also listed the amount of profit to the CCP for the total of transplants at a whopping $1 billion a year industry for China. I mean, these are people's organs, people.
Here's a clip from the documentary Harvested Alive, 10 years investigation of forced organ harvesting, showing a woman calling a hospital in China asking about transplants.
怎么了，先生？喂，你好，你是中山医院对，是的，病号。肝脏移植中心吗？对，什么事？我是要咨询一下。等一会儿啊，我在一上面，好吧？好。喂。喂，你好，哎，你好，你是医生吗？这个移植手术啊，
那可以做的。
那要等多久啊？
你放1个礼拜左右就可以做了。
还有没有这种列这个法律这种提供的就说是很好，这个
我们都是这种。
Also, according to a very thorough report from former Canadian Secretary of State David Kilgour and lawyer and human rights activist David Meadus, this is very much happening on this scale.
They wrote a book called Bloody Harvest, and in it they did an extensive investigation, even posing as people needing transplants. What they found was staggering, with numerous testimonials from practitioners following people who went to China and received a transplant in just a few weeks, websites offering transplants with a focus on wait times, and so much more.
However, there is some good news. After Xi Jinping took over as the leader of China, he launched his anti-corruption campaign and is slowly arresting people who have taken part in the persecution along with Jiang's faction.
Before Jiang stepped down, he placed all of his own people in power. So whoever became president really didn't have full control, similar to what's going on with our own country. According to all of our research, the issue related to the China South Sea, the downfall of the Chinese economy, and the drug epidemic is all related to Jiang's faction.
This is solely to make Xi look bad to the world's governments and to take back control. Xi's never been supportive of any of the persecutions, but he can't come out and say this. But he's arrested over 2 million officials in China, with Zhou Yongkang being one of the highest.
This would literally be like President Trump arresting the head of the CIA, the FBI, and the entire military. So this is no small thing. All of these guys had their hands in the organ harvesting and were operating at the highest levels. But the only crimes that they were put on trial for were extortion, money laundering, and corruption.
For some reason, I'm thinking some of the 82,000 sealed indictments are kind of like this, but Xi Jinping's goal is to save the Communist Party, which is why he never mentioned organ harvesting. But honestly, he would have better luck trying to jump in water without getting wet than trying to save the party. I mean, really.
Yeah, the deeper he gets in the anti-corruption campaign, the more he is realizing how corrupt it actually is. There is no saving the regime.
Also in the US, a resolution was finally passed by Congress in 2016 condemning this organ harvesting and acknowledging it is actually happening after 16 years of silence. I mean, 16 years?
16 years.
However, there have been a few senators and representatives who are very active in stopping the persecution, such as Representative Dana Rohrabacher.
Now you guys might be thinking, Ben and Rob, you mentioned the Clintons at the beginning. Do they have anything to do with the current situation in China?
No man, you guys, this is deep. We can't give too much away just yet because we're still going through all of our resources, our sources, and insider info, and even evidence found in the Podesta emails.
This actually just doesn't end with the Chinese and its ties to the Clinton Foundation. Haiti seems to have some big connections to organ pillaging. But organ harvesting is just the beginning. With China's one-child policy, I mean, there is a never-ending supply of babies coming out of China for the deep state. I mean, this stuff is crazy.
Oh, and Haiti? Haiti is like the voodoo capital of the world,
exactly.
Right? This is weird. But hold on, before we all dive deep into that one, we still need to compile the data and gather factual evidence, right? We trust the information that was given to us, but for this, we need to present it with solid evidence and really go hard on it, so let's just leave it at that.
Now, you guys might also be thinking, this is so heartbreaking, and I'm glad I know, but what can I do to help?
You can start by sharing this with your friends and family, contact your local representatives, and push them harder to respond to this. Let's put some pressure on them.
For sure. And you can also reach out to stoporganharvesting.org to find out a lot more information, including evidence, testimonials, news, and ways you can get involved to help spread the awareness of this atrocity.
Yeah, we're not disgusting enough to make this up. This stuff is happening. But we'll for sure have a lot more on this in the future, so stay tuned. Also, don't forget to join our new platform at edgeofwonder.tv, where we'll be posting more of our sensitive topics there that we really can't host on YouTube.
We also have some big plans for it and are still in the works, so we'll announce it once we have it all figured out for you guys. And until next time, we'll see you guys out
on the edge
of disclosure.
Hopefully.
For some reason, I started thinking of like a campsite.
Yeah, a campfire.
I was like, well,
what am I saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Kumbaya, my love.
It's funny.
Okay. Not the same kind of campfire.
Definitely not the same kind of campsites. That's definitely not it.